饲养频道只做最干货的爬虫视频。说到养蛇，大多数的蛇养起来都没有什么难度，可买到一条不开食的蛇是最让人头疼的事情。如何让拒食的蛇开食，又如何让只吃活食的蛇吃死食？想要宠物蛇吃得好，吃得健康，布莱恩的妙招绝对实用，一起来看吧。
So there is no doubt that the one thing people really get concerned about when they're buying a snake is, will it eat? So today, I'm going to go ahead and share the 3 easiest tips for you to make sure that your snake is going to feed well for you. So tip number 1 is get to know the snake you're going to get before you buy it. Like for instance, if you get a really wacky snake like these Calabar burrowing pythons, you can't expect this to eat a frozen rat or a frozen rabbit, obviously. And actually, these are particularly known for liking rat pinkies. And unfortunately, they like live rat pinkies a lot. But sometimes they'll eat frozen. So again, once you get to know that if I want a Calabar burrowing python, I'm going to need to make sure I have a source for live pinky rats, or maybe frozen pinky rats. But again, it's not going to eat something that you don't know, that is not going to eat, right? Like, or say a Brazilian rainbow. This happens to be a hypo-Brazilian, but you got to remember, as a baby, it's probably going to eat frozen fuzzies. But as adults, it's going to eat frozen rats. That's right, almost big rats. So not only are they known for typically taking frozen, so you don't have to worry about live, but they're also a rat eater. So you have to make sure that you have an availability to large or small large rats, because that's what they eat. So the more you get to know about the snakes that you're going to actually get prior, the better success you're going to have. But let's go to the next level. Let's say that you're going to want to get a ball python, which is of course one of the most common and probably best pet snakes out there. But the problem is that some of them want live food. So I know, like, let's say you UK viewers, a lot of times you'll say stuff like, well, it's illegal to feed live in the UK. And I get that. I totally get that. But the fact is that when you keep royal pythons, as you guys call them over there, still the vast majority of people that keep a collection feed live to the animals that are going to eat live. It's very important to know that before you're getting an animal. Yeah, a lot of them will feed on frozen, and we're going to talk later in the show how you can have success getting them switched to frozen. But my point is, get to know your snake. If the live is a no-go for you, if that's a deal breaker, I will not feed live to my snake, then a ball python might not be your option. You might want to stick with something more like a corn snake. Again, get to know your snake. All right, let's take it to the next level. Let's say that you think that you're ready for a big snake like this albino reticulated python, which, by the way, about a week or 2 ago, I asked you guys over on my vlog channel, and I vlog each day, Monday through Friday, so you can check it out right here or down at the link in the description. But I asked you guys what I should name this girl. I've had her for a few years, and she hasn't had a name, and she is so energetic. And I tell you what, you guys dropped about 1,000 names on me. I loved them all, but I decided that I'm going to name her Daisy. I just think she's got a great personality. She's yellow. She's absolutely beautiful. So what do you guys think? Is Daisy a good name for her? I sure think so. Regardless, when you're ready for a big snake like this, you have to take into account of what they're going to eat when they're bigger. And Daisy and all my big snakes eat frozen rabbits. So again, you have to be prepared. You can't say, oh, well, I'm just going to feed it rats, because you'll probably have to feed something like Daisy maybe 10 or 15 rats a week, which is going to cost you about $100 a week. Are you prepared to spend $100 or maybe feed a frozen rabbit? Again, we only feed frozen, but still, again, is it a deal breaker for you? I love rabbits. I love all animals, even mice and rats. But you have to be prepared to feed these guys whatever they want to eat. So that's my first tip. You have to get to know your snake and have to be prepared to understand what these guys need to eat, even if it means you have to feed Lil Thumper off. Getting back to tip 1, when I talked about frozen feeders, let's just assume that you want a snake that eats frozen, or a species of snakes that is known to eat frozen. A lot of times I get asked the question, how do I thaw them out? So I want to just go over that. These are some fuzzies here, frozen fuzzies. And basically, I like to take lukewarm water, maybe on a little bit of the warm side, not hot, because you got to remember, if you put too much heat on these guys, they're actually going to cook a little bit. You don't want that. It's probably not good for the snake, plus it'll kind of turn it off. So basically, just throw your rodents in a bucket like this, set your temperature to, again, a little bit warmer than lukewarm, like kind of warm to the touch, but not hot to the touch. Now, another technique is literally just, put down some paper towel, set them out somewhere, and let them thaw for an hour, hour and a half, something like that. I personally like to thaw in a bucket with warm water, but again, that's totally up to you. Whatever you want to do, if you want to take the time. Now, there's some people that feel that water that goes into it actually will help the snake kind of lubricate on the way down. I'm not 100% sure I believe in that, but at the same time, now if you get a picky feeder, which we're going to talk in a little bit, sometimes thawing it in warm water can actually cause it not to eat. But we're going to talk about that in another tip. But for now, let's just go ahead. So you've got lukewarm water, just enough to kind of submerge them in, just like this. And then go ahead and leave those in there for probably anywhere from 20 minutes to a half an hour, and then they're going to thaw out. Now, you can, if you want, warm them up a little bit at the end so that they're not cold, but that's it. But then after you're done with that, let's say this is taken, follow me guys. All right, so once you drain the water out of the bucket, basically what I'll do is I'll just get paper towel that I set down, and I just want to make sure I dry these guys off the best I can. And basically it's for a couple things. Number one, snakes will usually have a tendency more to go after something that is a little bit more dry. And the other thing is like if you're feeding on bedding, which I want to show you right now, and I want to talk about the bedding issue, because every now and then we'll feed something and some bedding will get attached to a frozen rodent and people kind of freak out about it. So let me talk about that, but let's go feed right now. So again, we keep our colubrids on this aspen shavings, which is a wood type of shavings that's really good. So let's say when I'm going to feed this guy here, come on, little buddy. Oh, see that? Now, of course, with that, so you can see right there, look at how it's actually, you can see, well, he's wrapped it up pretty good. But if you look, there's actually bedding on the rodent itself. So as it's eating it, it's going to eat a little bit of that bedding. And a lot of times people kind of freak out about that. They're like, oh my God. Well, there's two ways you can avoid it if you really wanted to. You can certainly use a feeding cage, which a lot of people do. And there's a lot of kind of, talk about, should I remove my snake from the cage and put it into a feeding tub, or should I keep it in its cage? Listen, if your snake eats really, really well, move it to a tub. That way you have no bedding, you have no issues with the snake getting any kind of bedding ingested. But if your snake is a little bit timid and a little bit shy, like some snakes are, if you move it, it may stress it out and it doesn't want to eat. Now, the whole idea behind it, of course, is like, okay, well, if I go in the cage and feed it, it may think the next time I go in the cage, it's going to think my hand is food, which is certainly a possibility. But I always say that if you go in the cage 7 days a week, and only one day you feed it, probably not going to condition that animal to think that every time you go in there, there's going to be food. But I get the argument, and I understand it. Whatever you guys want to do. The other thing you can do is by drying them off really good, you have a less chance of that getting stuck, that bedding getting stuck, as well as some people will even use like paper plates, little throwaway paper plates, and they'll set it down, and that's where they'll put the rodent. That way there's no bedding on it. But with all that said, guys, snakes in the wild eat dirt, they eat sticks, they eat branches, they eat weeds, they eat everything. They're not killing a rodent and then going, oh, I gotta clean it up before I eat. So really, a little bit of bedding is not gonna hurt the animal. I've never had a snake get impacted from bedding. Certainly if it was an extreme example, maybe it could, but I've never had it happen. So regardless, you can see feeding right on the bedding like this is completely fine. And this guy is just crushing it right now. But you can see, look at the little bit of bedding on there. It's gonna eat a handful of chips. And you know what? It's going to pass those chips and it's not going to be an issue. Tip number 2 is try everything. I mean everything you can think of within reason, of course. This goes a little bit back to knowing your snake. Now, take for instance hognose snake, like this pastel pink albino hognose. They're kind of known for being a little bit picky when they're young. Now, westerns usually transfer over to rodents really easy, whereas easterns are typically toad eaters. Now, some will transfer over to rodents, but my point is, get to know what your snake might want, and then try everything under the sun. When someone calls me or emails me and says, my snake won't eat, the first question I ask is, what have you tried? And if you tell me that you've tried frozen mice, then it's really not on the snake, it's on you as a keeper. You have to try everything. A frozen mouse isn't everything, right? So the point is that, you may need frozen mice. You may try frozen rats. You may try frozen African soft birds. You may try all kinds of different things, and then you can transfer to the next thing. Listen, unless you've tried all your options, really your snake isn't the non-feeder, it's your problem as a keeper. Snakes that are captive born and healthy always want to eat. You just have to figure out what they do want to eat. And they, something like a hognose, we have tremendous amount of success when they don't eat frozen. We try live. If they don't eat live, we'll try tuna scent. That's right, we get little tuna and we just dip a pinky in the tuna and we put it in the cage, and that works a lot of times. Now, it's not a foolproof. My point is, try everything. Another example that a lot of people have success with, especially with things like carpet pythons and more arboreal snakes, is they'll actually take chicken broth, like the broth of a chicken, and just dip that rodent in that chicken because you want to give it that bird scent. You can try with hogs, you can try toad scents, you can try lizard scents with things like corn snakes. My point is, try everything. Another example of an unusual snake would be these rhino rat snakes. Typically, as babies, they really want to eat fish, and then they eventually switch over to pinkies. But we have tremendous amount of success with feeding them little tiny fish as babies. If we didn't try that, then they probably wouldn't eat and they wouldn't thrive, and we wouldn't be able to get them onto rodents, and they would eventually perish, which is something we don't want to do. Now, let me just back up for 1 second. When I said that you have to try everything, I'm just assuming one thing, which is the fact that you have the proper temperature, you have the proper humidity, the proper caging, the least amount of stress as possible, right? So if it's a ball python or other snake, it needs a hide box. If it's maybe a Brazilian rainbow, it needs a moist box. So these things work. Now, another trick that we really have huge success with baby snakes, so let's say you're buying a baby snake and it just won't eat. You've tried, let's say a corn snake. Let's just say as an example a corn snake. Let's go look at a baby corn snake and I'll tell you what I mean. Come follow me for a second here. So let's say that you have a little baby corn snake like this guy here, right? Little tiny baby corn snake. Now, these guys are really notorious for eating frozen pinkies, no problem. But every now and then, they get a little bit finicky. And so what we'll try is we'll try frozen, then we'll try live pinkies, then we'll try lizard scenting pinkies, and sometimes even tuna. So we'll try all of those scents. But if that doesn't work, we'll just take a little bit of a deli cup, which let me find a deli cup for you guys here. Come follow me, guys. So we'll just take a deli cup like this, make sure there's holes in them, and a lid like this, just like this right here. So again, deli cup, holes in it, lid right here, and we'll actually put the snake in it with a pinky, and then we just cap that off like that, and we leave it in overnight. And a lot of times, whether it's frozen or live, being in overnight trap with it will cause it to eat, which is really a great tip for you guys. That's the other thing I can't stress enough, is that, just because you drop a rodent in a cage, whether it's frozen or whatever, and you leave it for 10 minutes, it doesn't eat, that doesn't mean it didn't eat. A lot of snakes are nocturnal, so they need to be left at night. So if you're feeding a frozen, I wouldn't suggest necessarily feeding live unless it's a pinky or a fuzzy and leaving it in overnight. But if it's something bigger that can hurt the snake, that's probably not a good idea whatsoever. But certainly if it's a pinky, a fuzzy live, or frozen, leave it in overnight, because oftentimes that's when snakes eat. They eat at night. So, but this deli cup trick, I tell you, it's a lifesaver. It works with so many little baby snakes. All right, now I'm going to go on to tip number 3 for you people that hate live feeders. Let's take, for instance, this pastel GHI ball python here. He's a male, and he's actually about 3 years old, and he's not really big, and he only eats live. We cannot get him onto frozen. A lot of our ball pythons really depends on the time of the year. Sometimes they'll eat frozen, other times there's nothing you can do, and we have to feed them live. But if you are just dead set, first off, if your snake won't eat, you have to offer it live. I mean, you have to. As an owner, it's not right to have your snake starve to death because you have some aversion to live food. But that being said, it is completely responsible for you to want to go over to frozen, not only for the safety of your animals, but also, if you're an animal lover like me, you don't really want to watch an animal die like that. So I totally get it. So I'm going to give you guys a tip that works really well for us. Once a snake has eaten 2 or 3 live meals, a lot of times this tip will really, really help you get it back onto frozen and consistently onto frozen. So here we go. All right, so guys, I've been thawing out these rats for the last maybe 20-30 minutes in warm water, and as you can see, I mean, they're pretty good sized rats right here, but this is just kind of like, again, warm water. They're definitely thawed through. I can feel them. They're 100% thawed through. So what I want to do now is actually go hot. And I'm not talking like scalding hot, like boiling hot, but pretty darn hot, like, I mean, hot to the touch type hot. Because what you got to remember with, let's say, a ball python that's a finicky animal, ooh, that's nice and hot. I'm going to just cool off a little bit. And I'm not going to put a ton of water in here. I'm just going to kind of cover the rodents so that they, what I call superheat. Now, again, going back to what I was saying, you got to remember that ball pythons and most pythons have heat pits. So they're sensing that heat, like they're like, okay, when they're in the wild, it's kind of like that movie Predator, right? They're in the dark and those heat pits are picking up the thermal kind of grading of what's going on there. And when a rodent runs by and they see that heat coming, what the heck is that noise? When they see that heat coming, they're like, holy cow, wham, and they nail it. That's what we're trying to achieve. So come on, follow me. Now what you want to do is actually bring the bucket itself, and we're going to go around this way, guys. Bring the bucket itself to the snake, because you don't want to, thaw these out and get them dry and then have them cool off. The idea is to superheat that rodent, so that way when you offer it to a ball python, it is immediately just really picking up on those heat sensor pits, like, holy cow, I need to feed on this, and just bam, they're going to go for it. So I want to actually bring it out to the cages out here. I'm going to grab some paper towel real quick, because that's the next thing is, again, you're trying to simulate as best as you can what it's like to eat an actual rodent that comes out in the bush, so to speak. Because again, these are live rodent eaters. We know that these guys eat live, so we now have to try to trick them into feeding frozen. And again, by that nice and, oh man, this is, I mean, it is really hot, guys. I mean, not like burning hot, but I bet you it's 105 degrees or something like that, which is really going to flare off those heat pits. Now what I want to do is just really give it a good dry, but you have to do this relatively quick because you don't want it to cool off. And then go ahead and just offer it to the ball python here. There you go. You see, now that was actually a live feeding ball python that just took frozen for me. So this is kind of the option that you can go, is superheat that rack, dry it off really quick, and then offer it right away. And those heat pits are going to go bam, they're going to fire up and they're going to go after them. Now, again, you may only have 10 or 20 or maybe 30% success rate to go, but you can try it and try it and try it, and eventually they will switch over. Typically, I know that once a ball python starts eating frozen or live really quickly, like they're attacking, that's when you do it. When you start to open that cage and it just immediately like looks like, oh, I want that live rodent, now you can switch it off to frozen, and that's the way you can switch it over. But let's go ahead and talk about, let's say these 3 tips just haven't worked for you. In particular, it's going to be ball pythons I'm talking about. I'm not a big fan of force feeding or assist feeding most snakes.
更多知识，欢迎关注饲养公号。